In 2002, soon after the September 11th terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center, Osama bin Laden released a letter titled The Letter to America, which has now, 20 some years later, been blowing up on social media. In the heat of the Israel Palestine conflict, we have a generation, my generation, who is taking a very interesting look at this letter. And interesting is an understatement. This is not a video that I necessarily want to be making, but it is one that I feel necessary to be made. And so today we're going to talk about that on Speechless. Cut for time. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Speechless Cut for Time. I'm your host, Kev Phares, 22-year-old conservative college student out of Central Illinois, host of Speechless on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. But I can't necessarily fit everything I want to on my radio show, and some things, this might actually make it onto my radio show, but it needs an off-air content forum. And to make sure you guys don't miss a minute of anything like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment, share, everything like that. You get the gist. But like I said, this is not a video I want to be making. Why do I have to make it? Why do we have to have this conversation? Well, this is why. Take a look at what's been circulating on social media recently.
Which is Osama Bin Laden's letter to America explaining why he attacked Americans. And I am ashamed to say that I not only have never read this letter, but I didn't even know this letter existed. It's wild, and everyone should read it. If you haven't read it yet, read it. However, be forewarned that this has left me very disillusioned, and I feel the same exact way I felt when I was deconstructing Christianity. I feel a little bit just confused, like I have entered into another timeline. What is this? And yeah, so go read it.
So I just read A Letter to America. And I will never look at life the same. I will never look at this country the same. Please read it. And if you have read it, let me know if you are also going through an existential crisis in this very moment. Because in the last 20 minutes, my entire viewpoint on the entire life I have believed and I have lived has changed. Please read that entire letter.
I need everyone to stop what they're doing right now and go read. It's literally 2 pages. Go read A Letter to America. And please come back here and just let me know what you think, because I feel like I'm going through like an existential crisis right now, and a lot of people are. So I just need someone else to be feeling this too.
I need you to stop what you're doing and go read A Letter to America. It is literally the craziest thing I've read in a while. And while I can't say that I'm that surprised, I am pretty shocked. So go read it and tell me what you think, because I really also need to talk to other people about this. And actually, before you even read the letter, I did want to mention, in reading the letter, I could only think of this tweet that I saw the other day. Under settler colonialism, any kind of resistance is branded as terrorist because the only acceptable violence is violence by the occupier.
So this is fucking insane. I just read Osama Bin Laden's Letter to America, which I will be going through right here, but it's actually so mind-fucking to me that terrorism has been sold as this idea to the American people, and honestly just so many Western inhabitants within certain nations, that this group of people, this random group of people, just suddenly wakes up one day and just fucking hates you, just wants you dead, wants you gone, and this is all because they believe that they're better than it. Like, that is the root of terrorism. It doesn't make sense. They just hate your fucking nation. But reading this letter, it becomes apparent to me that the actions of 9/11 and those acts committed against the USA and its people were all just the buildup of our government failing other nations.
To deceive you, my voice just wants to leave you.
In majority of
So there's more. But if you haven't gotten the point already, it is going viral on TikTok, especially among people of my generation, to be in some way supportive of the messages preached by Osama bin Laden, the man who took responsibility for the September 11th attacks that killed over essentially 3,000 Americans. And these are young Americans voicing this support. I've obtained a copy of the letter. I don't know if I should read it. And to help guide me in this conversation and discuss it more, I have my good friend, and you guys all know him. He's a history educator out of Nevada. And so I consider him somewhat well-versed on topics such as this, historical and in some ways political. And so it's my friend. You guys know him. You might love him. You might. Josh Bender. How's it going, Josh?
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Well, as good as you can be when you have an entire generation that seems to be applauding people and probably one of the most known Islamic extremist terrorists that is responsible for a significant portion of American hatred that still rings true today in the Middle East. We have a lot to talk about with this. And you asked me specifically when it came to this subject, because you said you had a lot to say regarding it. You are molding young minds, and these are the people that that are on these TikToks that I just showed to the audience. These are people that have been molded in some way by history educators. I don't want to say just like yourself, but essentially just like yourself, have sat in those classrooms, have sat through days of September 11th in which most classrooms in some way discuss it. What are your thoughts on just young people's discussion of this letter and its blow up?
Well, it's so interesting because so for context, I'm 23. I think I was a little over a year old when 9/11 happened. So I don't remember it. I can't say I remember where I was because I was crying in a crib. You know, it's my mom said she was crying in the crib and she was so shocked. And so I'm still teaching it almost as a historical event because I don't remember it. But I still take a day every year to teach it. Usually it's the Monday of, like this year it was on September 11th, or it was the day after last year. I take a day, I teach it to all my students, and I go in depth. I use audio, use video, use pictures. I play the audio of people from the plane, from the first responders on the phone, people as they died. And I always love the lesson, not because it's a fun lesson. It's not. It's my most dreaded day because I hate going in knowing I have to listen to that all day. I come home feeling numb and just feeling nothing because you hear it so many times. It's numbing to you. But when I was building that lesson last year, I spent all weekend combing through footage and pictures and audio, trying to find what I think would be the best to explain what was going on, but not traumatize them. Unfortunately, I listened to things that I never wanted to listen to. That's the curse of being a teacher. Sometimes you got to listen to that stuff.
Yeah.
But I have kids leaving crying, kids leaving who just look shocked. And they come in the next day and say, I went home and talked to my parents about it. I talked to my family about it. I asked them where they were. We had a discussion about it. It's always the greatest feeling as an educator to know that they've continued that education at home on their own. You know, you wish it's a better topic. Any topic is something that they, and I have read this letter before. I had a professor who had us read this letter, and he said, I'm not having you read this because I agree with it. In fact, I don't. But I need you to understand there's two sides to every story. There is a perspective. I want you to understand his perspective. I think it's horrific, but this was his justification. And he was trying to put that justification out to the world that he did it. And I remember reading it the first time and being shocked. Not because it truly wasn't it was anti-Jew, and I think that really me, because that you don't hear that. But the blatant justification of killing civilians was, well, you elect that government, so you agree with everything they do.
Yeah. And so there's that. I want to, because, okay, so the letter is something that's very interesting to me right now, because this entire topic has multiple facets. Generation now, a part of our generation that is openly saying that, I mean, you saw that one near the end there that basically that said, quoting or paraphrasing the quote, that Osama bin Laden was actually right,
was right.
which is absolutely abhorrent, condemnable, disgusting. But then we also have this letter. Okay. And so we want to talk about the letter itself, but the media doesn't actually want us to even know about this letter. The letter was published in 2002 by The Guardian as, again, a journalistic piece to say this was his justification. This is the reason. Very honestly, I kind of compare it to the fact that the Nashville shooter manifesto, like people want that release so that there's people want to understand why somebody would do such an atrocious act.
Well,
right?
I even compare it to like Mein Kampf. I mean,
something like that as well,
forget.
Publicly accessible. But since people have been becoming supportive of this letter, young Americans, and just young people in general, The Guardian has now taken that letter off of its website. I have obtained a copy through the fact that things that are on the internet are perpetually on the internet. You can still find it. So I've obtained a copy, and I asked you this before because so The Guardian has removed it. Other social media sites are looking like they are removing people that are showing it unabridged, everything like that. And so I asked you before we even started recording, and we started getting into it, but I just thought, let's just hash it out on air. Should I read through or at least show this full letter?
So I'm in a multiple things. One, I think I truly believe when they all said you should read that letter, I think you should. I think every single person should read that letter. But I think you need to do it of your own accord, and you need to go into it in your own mindset, because it's tough to read, not because it's not detailed of what's going on, but because you're just reading this going, how can someone be this blatantly evil and this blatantly stupid? I mean, it's stupid. And so I'm all for showing it and letting people see it, but I think my problem is, and I said this to you, was if social media is deleting people for even talking, for really showing it. You know, I know this sounds bad, but we can't run the risk of losing shows like yours. That's the danger, and they're doing that on purpose.
Yeah, and I understand that. So it brings me to the question that of when this letter was publicly accessible, we have people like what I showed that's what they did with the information. It was not, and that's how they interpreted it. That's how they perceived it. And I am an ardent, I mean, there's a reason why free speech is the First Amendment.
Exactly.
There's a reason why it's the first one. And my firm belief is that we let all the ideas out there because the good ones should supersede the bad, or will supersede the bad. But now I'm questioning, with people like this out there, is that really what's happening?
Well, I think people are more and more easily falling victim to propaganda. I mean, that letter is propaganda. It is. That's
what I wanted to show this because so the next TikTok that I cut it off at, let's take a look here. Just take a look and listen.
Of these situations, and this letter was insanely eye-opening. I really urge everybody to Google and read it, because I thought that I had quite a lot of media literacy, but this takes it to a whole nother fucking level where I was just like, holy shit, like propaganda is genuinely so deeply embedded into our fucking DNA.
Read a letter to America, you're probably waking up.
So I wanted to show that one because she discusses propaganda.
Right.
And she says it's so deeply rooted. And look, I don't necessarily 100% disagree with her in the fact that, yes, there is a lot of propaganda out there. I mean, you get any email from a party, political Republican, Democrat, it's fueled with propaganda. Hell, Captain America, you're a relatively large Marvel fan. You like the Marvel comics and everything like that. Captain Marvel was created as anti-Nazi propaganda.
Yeah, he was started as a propaganda technique to get Americans excited.
So we are embedded with propaganda in our entire society. But the fact of the matter is that young woman, I assume, don't cancel me, but that young woman also is not recognizing that, like you said, this letter that we have to talk about as a paraphrased thing, because it is being shielded from society as we speak, is in and of itself propaganda. It is. It is written by the man who, and you're right, when you said your professor wanted you to read it because there are two sides to every story, at least. That's a propaganda side in and of itself.
Yeah.
In that letter. I'm going to read excerpts of it. I don't care. I'm going to bring it on screen. Screw it. Here's the thing. Okay. So everybody out there, if you're watching, and you're whatever point you tuned in on, I have to say this first before I bring any of it on screen. Before YouTube tries to demonetize this video, I would like to make clear that the opinions and commentary in this entire video are in no way trying to condone, incite, make light of, or in any way encourage violence. The purposes of this video are entirely journalistic in nature. However, I don't necessarily consider myself a journalist. This purpose of this video is journalistic in nature, and the sources used, like this letter that I'm about to provide, are for the purpose of giving information to the public. Information that, like I said, other news sources and some social media have deemed unfit for public consumption. And now, do I agree or disagree with that statement? Do I agree? I think that there are some people that it is unfit for them to read it because they are too stupid to understand what it is. Pretty much all the people that I just showed you in those damn TikToks, those are the people that are too stupid to discern what it says and the side of the story that we are going to be talking about. But I do not believe it should be shielded from the public, and this video shows that. Because I do still believe in the First Amendment, that good ideas will ultimately root out the bad ones. And so I'm going to bring up on screen here, let's take a little look-see at the letter to America that Osama Bin Laden wrote. I know I have ads on the screen, sorry, but let's take a look here. Can you see it good, Josh?
Can, yes.
I had to make it full screen on here. So if you look at this letter, this is the full text, Biden's letter to America. It is an online document, the full text of his letter to American people, reported in the Observer back on November 24th of 2002. So just about a little over a year after the September 11th attacks. The letter first appeared on the internet in Arabic and has since been translated and circulated by Islamists in Britain. So there's points of the Quran that are pushed in there. The main things I want to talk about because I read through it obviously before this.
Yeah.
Why are we fighting and opposing you? The two questions he seeks to answer, Osama bin Laden in this letter. Why are we fighting and opposing you? Why are we calling you to, and what do we want from you? So when he talks about why are the Islamic extremists, at the time Al-Qaeda, and then now you could say Hamas, who follows a very similar doctrine, why are they fighting and opposing you? And when they say you, they don't mean Israel. They kind of mean Israel, but who they really mean is America. That's who they really mean. So the answer, because you attacked us and continued to attack us, is what bin Laden had to say. Palestine, which has sunk under military occupation for more than 80 years, the British handed over Palestine. There's a lot about Palestine in there. The creation of Israel is a crime which must be erased. Now, what does he mean, Josh, when he says the creation of Israel is a crime which must be erased? Each and every person whose hands have come polluted in the contribution must pay its price and pay for it heavily.
I mean, he's saying that in his eyes, Israel should be destroyed, and every single person who backs this, the creation and supports Israel, needs to be killed. That's blatantly what he's saying.
Yep. It brings us both laughter and tears to see that you have not yet tried, or you have not yet tired of repeating your fabricated lies that the Jews have a historical right to Palestine, as it was promised to them in the Torah. Anyone who disputes with them on this alleged fact is accused of anti-Semitism. This is one of the most fallacious, widely circulated fabrications in history. The people of Palestine are pure Arabs and original Semites. It is the Muslims who are the inheritors of Moses. And he goes into more biblical jargon, basically claiming that it is the Muslims that have a right to Israel, not the Jewish people. When the Muslims conquered Palestine and drove out the Romans, Palestine, then he goes into more of that. The blood pouring out of Palestine must be equally revenged. You must know that the Palestinians do not cry alone. Their women are not widowed alone. Their sons are not orphaned alone. So once again, a call for violence in the blood pouring out of Palestine must be equally revenged. You attacked us in Somalia. You supported the Russian atrocities against us in Chechnya. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the word. The Indian oppression against us in Kashmir and the Jewish aggression against us in Lebanon. Under your supervision, consent, and orders, the governments of our countries, which acts as your agents, attack us on a daily basis. Goes in further discussing different instances in which there was military occupation or military action taken in different areas of Islamic rule. These governments have surrendered to the Jews and handed them most of Palestine, acknowledging the existence of their state over the dismembered limbs of their people. The removal of these governments is an obligation upon us and a necessary step to free Ummah, to make the Sharia the supreme law, and to regain Palestine. So here's an important point. The removal of these governments is an obligation upon us. To me, that is a basic direct call to overthrow not only Israel, but America and anybody who has ever in any way supported.
And they're saying the governments of these countries that we somehow put in place.
Yes. And to make Sharia law the supreme law.
Mm-hmm.
He goes into anger over stealing wealth and oil, which is sold, which was at the time sold to us. And if anything, man, I think we should be oil independent. I don't think we should be worried about the Middle East. But the reason is because of crazy people like this. Your forces occupy our nations. You spread military bases throughout them. You corrupt our lands. Once again, if you weren't screaming death to America, I don't know. Maybe there'd be a little bit more civility. You've supported the Jews in their ideas of Jerusalem is their eternal capital and agreed to move your embassy there. With your help and under your occupation, the Israelis are planning to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque under the protection of your weapons. Sharon entered the mosque to pollute. There's more and more and more that basically says the American people are the ones who choose their government. This is the part I know you wanted to talk about. Therefore, the American people are the ones who choose their government by way of their free will, a choice which stems from their agreement to its policies. Thus, the American people have chosen, consented to, and affirmed their support for the Israeli oppression of the Palestinians, the occupation and usurpation of the land, and its contentious killing, torture, punishment, and expulsion of the Palestinians. The American people have the ability and choice to refuse the policies of their government and even to change it if they want. So this is his justification for 9/11.
Right.
Is that there is no issue, and we're going to keep going through it, but I'm going to remove it for now. He basically says that there's no issue with the killing of innocent civilians through the attack on the World Trade Center because all Americans are at fault.
Right.
Would you agree that that's the sentiment that he's saying?
I mean, even a little more ahead than that, he says, you elect the government, you pay taxes, which then fund the bombs. You do this, you do this. As Americans are in somehow supporting this, whether through elections or taxes, you are now at fault. Yeah, I mean, that's blatantly what he's saying.
And so I want to remind everybody again that this is the letter that you have dozens, hundreds of TikToks coming out that are saying you should support this. The same guy that is basically calling for the death to America and says that the murder of your civilians, the murder of people like you watching, murder of people like me, Josh, any American civilian is quote unquote justified by this letter because we are in some way complicit.
Right.
Now, here's what I want to talk about when it comes to that is that sounds actually, I understand why leftists agree with that. Because where have we heard that kind of justification before? I'll never forget when I went out back in 2020 to a BLM protest in the suburbs of Chicago. And there was a woman, probably middle-aged white woman, with a sign that said white silence is white violence and pointed to me. Again, I was wearing neutral colors. I even had a mask on at the time to try to conceal my identity because I knew people might know that I was aligned with Republican ideas and conservative ideas and everything. And she pointed at me and said, "You are the problem. You are the problem." Now, to me, that sounds very similar. Now, she wasn't necessarily calling for my murder, but with her sign that says white silence is white violence, it's essentially the same kind of logic, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
the idea that, because you aren't necessarily doing everything in your power to appeal to the opinion I have, you are the problem.
Right. And if someone else were to hear her say you are the problem and go and attack you, yes. The letter's a little different because the letter was a blatant call to violence, but there's a justification to that mob mentality. And that's why I think this is so dangerous because, you see these people subscribe to this letter almost, and again, it's like how do you fall for blatant propaganda like this? It blows my mind. It shouldn't anymore because so many people fell for so much propaganda throughout 2020 and every year since. It's so much
scamdemic and everything.
Yeah, it's so much easier to fall for. It's so easy to fall for propaganda. But
everything with George Floyd was,
right. And one thing
the murals for a man who drug overdosed. Yep.
And the one thing that the one lady was like, we're taught that one day they just woke up and hated us. That's the gist. But you can do your due diligence, do some research. I did do research. I did a whole paper on. I took a Middle Eastern history class, and I did a modern Middle East. I did a paper on how Al Qaeda became ISIS, and how ISIS rose and fell. And what I learned was that it was these Islamic groups that were run by Osama bin Laden. He was fighting the Soviets.
Yeah.
When the Soviet Union collapsed, we filled in to make sure, hey, let's take care of the Soviet weapons. Let's secure it. We're going to secure this area, make sure there's peace, and then we're going to leave. Well, because we just moved in, he said, see, it's not just it was death to communism. Then it was changed to death to the West in America specifically, because we won the Cold War, and so he literally did just shift his target. That's all he did was he shifted his target for no real reason. We also funded his war against the Soviets because they were fighting the Soviets for us. It was a proxy war. So suddenly we say, all right, we're going to move in ourselves. We're not going to fund you. And it's, you're the bad guys. That's really what it was. It's simply what it was. And then of course they start perpetrating all these terror attacks. It blows my mind. It's like you read one of these sources and it's like, you don't do your due diligence and go do a little more research. I found all that on one big website that just laid out the history. It's not hard. And plus I want to point out half those people that were, or I would say pretty much everyone in that video who was sitting there saying that they supported this video would be killed by Bin Laden. Yeah. No questions asked.
Yeah. That's the other thing, because he basically says that they're all complicit.
They're all complicit.
So I'll let you go, but I want to let's look a little bit more at this because I do want to get through a good amount of the letter. We talk because he talks more about the American people. You see, like you said, the American people are the ones who pay taxes, which fund the planes that bomb us in Afghanistan, the tanks, everything like that. And you go, the American army is part of the American people. It is the very same people who are shamelessly helping the Jews fight against us. The American people are the ones who employ both their men and their women in the American forces, which attack us. This is why the American people cannot be innocent of all crimes committed by the Americans and the Jews against us. So these people that are supporting it, this is the gays for Palestine or the chickens for KFC. That's essentially what this is. And then he goes, and then this is the craziest thing to me, right? Is that he claims that, okay, well, the Jewish people are wrong and misled in the fact that they believe that God promised them the land. Then he says, Allah the Almighty legislated the permission and the option to take revenge. Thus, if we are attacked, then we have the right to attack back. Whoever has destroyed our villages and towns, then we have the right to destroy their villages and towns. Whoever has stolen our wealth, whoever has killed our civilians, then we have the right to kill theirs. So he claims, okay, well, Jews are wrong that Israel is God-given to them. Israel is Palestine, as he would call it, is actually God-given to us. And not only that, not only do we want that, we also want to do everything that we perceived has been done unto us. And more. I mean, take back revenge, not to mention the fact that, well, and here's the thing too, is they see it all as revenge. They see it all as revenge. Not the fact that Palestine has never actually been a real country. Israel has. Palestine has never actually, it's always just been a plot of territories and isolated cities and things like that. But Israel has actually been a defined country. Then he says the American government will and press still refuse to answer the question, why did they attack us in New York and Washington? If Sharon is a man of peace in the eyes of Bush, then we are also men of peace. Okay, Bin Laden. America does not understand the language of manners and principles, so we are addressing it using the language it understands.
Which, looking at that, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, look, I mean, no, I'm not sorry. I'm not going to apologize for attacking Bin Laden. He's a piece of shit. When did we? Yeah, kindly. I mean, when did we ever hijack a plane full of innocent civilians and crash them into your most populated city? When did we ever do that to you? We would never do that to you. When did we ever use civilians as pawns?
And that's what Hamas does. I've talked about it on my show before, even nowadays. Right. So, I mean, he used pawns back then, but nowadays what they'll do is they'll put bombs under a school and hide them there. And then America, using our technology, will realize, hey, there's a bunch of bombs under that school, or even Israel will. And they'll be like, we have to take action against that. And so then they will bomb a school.
Right. Their military headquarters is built under a hospital.
And exactly. And then Hamas will come out and be like, they bombed a hospital. They bombed a school. Well, that it's because they're and I mean this not in a complimentary way, but they are smart in the way that they can manipulate public perception.
Yeah, they understand the media and
the best propagandists are.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I even think of the UN the other day when they're like, well, we have a UN hospital that's running out of power and there's no water and this and that. There's nothing wrong there. And the videos come out and they're like, no, we found rocket launchers in here. We found bloody chairs with wire attached to them.
Yep.
Where people were tortured. We found victims of burnings. We found, yes, there's tons of dead children because they let them die. Because Hamas took the power and took the water, put it in their headquarters and not in the hospital. So children died.
Absolutely.
But it's somehow our fault, somehow Israel's fault. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
But, and so then I want to get into, so that was all, why did we do what we did, basically? Now, the next question that he seeks to answer in this letter is, as for the second question, what are we calling you to do and what do we want from you? Let's take a look at this as I pull it up on screen here. The first thing is we are calling you to Islam. So that's the crazy thing to me. Because that in and of itself, that line, the first thing we are calling you to is Islam, is entirely anti-American. Like, it is basically, we hate the entire idea of American. Not that, I mean, the entire idea, not just the American people, not just the taxes, no, that means he hates the fundamental idea of what America is. Because within the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause says that we will not establish a national religion.
Right.
Now, do we have religious ideals? Sure. Are our rights derived from God and our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence? Yes. But it never states that that's a Jewish God, a Christian God, if that could be a Greek God or a Roman God or an Islamic God.
Right.
Now, many will misconstrue that Establishment Clause to mean a separation of church and state, but that's a different argument. Here, though, Osama bin Laden is saying, I hate the entire fundamental idea of America because it allows choice. Because it allows freedom at a religious level. Then he goes on to justify that that what he wants, and the reason is for that. The religion of the unification of God, of freedoms from associating partners with him, and rejection of this, of complete love of him, the exalted, of complete submission to his laws, and of the discerning of all these opinions. His prophet, Muhammad, who was also a person who was known to justify and engage in pedophilia, child marriage. Just saying. Islam is the religion of all the prophets and makes no distinction between them. Peace be upon them all. It's the religion that we call you, the seal of the previous religions. It is the religion of the unification of God, sincerity. More and more, basically, just.
I want to talk about that last line in that sentence. And it is the religion of unity and agreement on the obedience to Allah and total equality between all people without regarding their color, sex, or language. There's a big piece of that missing, which is sexuality.
Their sexuality, but also just the hypocrisy in and of itself when it comes to the equality of sex. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Islamic countries are well known for saying women cannot leave the house without a man. Women cannot drive. Women cannot be educated. Like, you're right. Sexuality is not in there. And that's something that a lot of lefties should be known to, but he's misconstruing. Guarantee you he would have some level of a justification. Well, that actually is equal because the men do these things for them, and so then the women have to do these things for the men. That's probably what he'd argue. But how is that really equal?
Right.
It's
well, I'm even reading lower for the two. The second thing we call to you is to stop your oppression, lies, immorality, and debauchery that is spread among you. We call you to be people of manners, principles, honor, and purity, to reject the immoral acts of fortification, homosexuality, intoxicants, gamblings, and trading with interest. Right there, he is saying, by allowing gay people to exist, by allowing people to drink, by allowing people to gamble, by allowing people to have sex, you are being immortal, and thus we should kill you. Yep. I mean, it's what he is saying. So that's when, and I'm getting heated because I keep seeing these people. I'm assuming some of these people who are reading this are of the part of the LGBT.
If not the people that would consider them allies. They're either them themselves alphabet mafia warriors or allies for them.
Right. Are reading this and just ignoring that, or they're seeing pieces of it. Not seeing that one part where he literally says, if you are homosexual, if you are free with your, you're having sex with numerous people, you should stop or be killed. He's blatantly saying that.
Yep.
I again, it takes a couple of, and I do. Conspiracy part of my brain says, is this why the place like The Guardian take this letter down? Because they're saying, oh, well, it's being used out of context, so we don't want to. I mean, that was their exact justification, was, well, it's being used out of context, we don't want that. Okay, but if you leave the full context up, allow people to read the full context,
yep, they
are going to see that the taken out of context things are bullshit. So leave the full thing up.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the only context that they could say is missing is the fact that these kids have not had an accurate education on the both atrocities of 9/11 and the atrocities that Hamas has committed, Al-Qaeda committed, everyone involved in Islamic extremist period. And so the way I see it is that's a failure on the media in and of itself. Right. You should be the ones that are properly reporting. But and then I want to go down to, it is saddening to tell you that you are the worst civilization witnessed by the history of mankind. You're a nation who, rather than ruling by the Sharia of Allah in its constitution and laws, choose to invent your own laws as you will and desire. You separate religion from your policies, contradicting the pure nature which affirms absolute authority to the Lord and your Creator. You flee from the embarrassing question posed to you: how is it possible for Allah the Almighty to create his creation, grant them power over all, and then deny them that which they are the most in need of, knowledge of the laws which govern their lives? So it is saddening to tell you that you are the worst civilization witnessed by the history of mankind. Here's what okay. And then he goes into why we're just awful, why we hate you. Right. And then he even goes on. I thought it was funny. I'll admit, I think this is a little funny that he gives Clinton a shout out. Who can forget your President Clinton's immoral acts committed in the Oval Office? After that, you did not even bring him to account. Other than that, he made a mistake in which everything passed with no punishment. Is there a worse kind of event for which your name will go down in history and remembered by nations? Yeah, I would say there are worse acts than Clinton getting a blowjob in the Oval Office.
Right.
Our original sin of slavery.
Yeah.
Which I have no doubt with how well versed bin Laden was at politics at the time in America. I have no doubt he understands at least a bit of our history, including the Civil War, slavery. I would have no doubt. So to him, the worst act that has ever been committed in America, that's what he just said. Is there any worse kind of event for which your name will go down in history and remembered by nations? I'm sorry, but if we were being judged by our biggest ill, which is what the left does, the left, and in this case, Osama bin Laden, wants to judge America based on the worst of it.
Right.
And to him, even the best parts, such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, attempting some level of equality between people of different religions and backgrounds, all awful to him. But if you want to judge the worst to him, it is that Clinton got a blowjob in the Oval Office.
Right. I mean, looking at that too, you are the worst civilization. I could think of a couple world wars that would show that we're the exact opposite. I mean, hell, I mean, seriously. I mean, just looking. I mean, again, this is blatant propaganda. I mean,
or like, what about the people that used to throw children into a volcano? Like,
right.
And you're saying that we're the worst? Like,
right.
It's hyperbole. It's propaganda. That's what it is. It's using hyperbole to get people on your side. And I think one of the reasons why I believe that this is so attractive to some far radical, misguided lefties was especially that line that it started out with is that you are the worst civilization witnessed by the history of mankind. A lot of the left's ideology is teaching the majority of them to be self-hating.
Right.
If you are a man, hate yourself. If you are white, hate yourself. If you are straight, hate yourself. If you're an American, hate yourself because of all the bad things that anybody who has been a part of that identity group has done in the past. And do everything you can to change that, even if that means pretending to be another gender. Just saying. I mean, that's why I think it's so appealing. He continues with everything about how awful liberation is and how immoral America is. Let us not forget one of your major characteristics, your duality in both manners and values, your hypocrisy in manners and principles. All manners and principles and values have two scales, one for you and one for others. What about you, Osama?
Right.
Now, this is why another reason why I think it's incredibly attractive to the left, and especially building off the self-hating ideology that I just said. Let me highlight it for you. The freedom and democracy that you call to is for yourselves and for white race only. As for the rest of the world, you impose upon them your monstrous destructive policies and governments, which you call the American friends. Yet you prevent them from establishing democracies. Excuse me? The whole purpose of the Vietnam War was to attempt to establish democracy in a communist country. Like, am I wrong, Josh?
I mean, listen, he is right. There are definitely times where I don't want to say he's right, but he's right in the instance of there are times where we say, okay, it's either a communist dictator or a dictator that's backed by us. So we're going to back that dictator. There's definitely, I mean, that Vietnam was one of those instances. It was a dictator who hated communism or a communist dictator. We chose a dictator who hated communism. He wasn't a democracy by any means, but he was a dictator. But I mean, even looking at that, and I'll say this too. I mean, I think it's been recent that people are starting to say, hey, not every country wants the same things that America does. We need to stop pretending they do. There are certain countries that don't, and we can't say that we're going to put our values on there.
Mm-hmm.
But he also would not allow for democracy. If he was in charge, he would not allow for democracy.
Well, I mean, essentially, again, Hamas, who is a product of Al-Qaeda, Palestine back in the early 2000s had what was called a democracy. They elected Hamas and have since never held an election. So would you call that a democracy?
Right.
It's your policy. This is an interesting one. Your policy on prohibiting and forcibly removing weapons of mass destruction to ensure world peace, it only applies to those countries which you do not permit to possess such weapons. As for countries you consent to, such as Israel, then you're allowed to keep and use such weapons to defend their security. Anyone else who you suspect might be manufacturing or keeping these kinds of weapons, you call them criminals and you take military action against them. Look, here's the thing for this is, would you want, if your neighbor was actively saying that he was going to kill you, that he wanted you dead, but you were bigger, stronger, and had more ability to kill that neighbor, wouldn't you just be like, okay, I'm going to try to make sure that you don't have that ability?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, and again, we now know that the idea of weapons of mass destruction was a lie. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
At the time we didn't, and again, I think that goes into the whole beginning when he was like, well, you consent to every action. We don't. We don't consent to every action. B, if they are lying to us, we can't properly consent to these actions, but yes, exactly. I mean, it's the idea of, and his whole thing is, you allow nukes. Yeah, because we won. We're the only superpower left, so we get to dictate that. Yeah. I'm sorry that you lost. I'm sorry that you barely beat the Soviets. I'm sorry that we had to outspend the Soviets and they had disappeared because you were probably going to lose to them. Like, I'm sorry.
I'm not sorry.
I know. I'm not sorry.
Don't apologize. Don't be an apologist.
I'm saying I'm sorry. Is in the fact
colloquially, I get
colloquially, yes. No, obviously, I'm very happy that the Russians, the Soviets, almost beat them. I wish they would have beat them. I wish we didn't back them. But it was a proxy war, I'll tell you what, Osama sure as hell wasn't upset when we were giving him weapons to fight the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty happy then.
Yeah, there's so much more to this. And again, I encourage, if you want to read this, I'm going to post the link in the description, the full thing, if you want to read it in its entirety. But so much of it is disgusting. I'm trying to highlight some of the parts that are most worthy of conversation. Like I said, I'm going to post this link in the description. If YouTube will probably try to take this down, everybody, clearly YouTube will probably try to take this down. But let's get to this next part here. I'm going to make this full screen. There is one. Oh my gosh, I just lost it. It has to do with, here we go. Your law is the law of the rich and wealthy people who hold sway in their political parties and fund their election campaigns with their gifts. Behind them stand the Jews who control your policies, media, and economy.
Right.
That which you are singled out for in the history of mankind is that you have used your force to destroy mankind more than any other nation in history, not to defend principles or values. Wait. So you're going to say here, Jews control the policies, media, and economy, but not give any reasoning or statement as to how that is, that's a claim without evidence. There's no evidence there. His attempt is to say that our law is of rich people, Jews are rich, therefore they do all of this. That's his attempt.
Mm-hmm.
Which, who else started saying that? I mean, let's talk about World War II, right? Okay, so, and I like to pretend I know history as much as Josh, so I'm going to try to give the lesson, and Josh, you can correct me whenever I'm wrong. But sure. World War I ends, Germany was seen as at fault for it and lost, and so then they were in a bunch of debt. Well, who were the primary people that were bankers and in areas in which wealth was either controlled or created? Were Jewish people. So who did Hitler blame for the debt that was really caused by World War I and their loss? Well, he blamed the people that in some way still had created or controlled wealth. A lot of them. Jewish people, which,
right.
Again, it was all of Germany's fault. It was all of Germany's fault for World War I, the debt they were in. It was not just the people that happened to be in areas of wealth.
Well, no, that's not even true. What happened was we blamed Germany for some reason because they extended the war too long. Okay, we blame them.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Their solution was just to hyperinflate, was just to print more money, cause hyperinflation. An American banker who happened to be Jewish stepped in, fixed the system. He negotiated with France. He negotiated with Belgium. He negotiated with England and said, hey, you guys are asking too much. Let's do this. Let's set up a payment plan. Let's do this. He built a payment plan up. He helped fund factories in Germany, helped fund businesses in Germany. American money was going into Germany. It was fixing the economy. Then the Great Depression happened. And all of a sudden, the American money dried up. So then Germany crashed again. And Hitler said, look who did this. An American banker stepped in and did this, and who happened to be Jewish had stepped in and do this. He got a peace prize. He got a Nobel Prize for it.
Yeah.
And then it failed. So clearly, this was their instrument. This they're doing the whole time.
And so my point being with all of that is, who else is making the same justification? And once again, we know that Hitler's, and the reason why it's important to point this out is because we know Hitler's justification, which is almost, or is very similar to that of Osama bin Laden's, was false. So, would you trust the two justifications that, again, are claims with limited to no evidence provided? Would you trust those, or would you say, hey, maybe that's not true? Maybe that's not true. The left loves to talk about misinformation. How is this not another instance of that?
Well, because it backs their preconceived notion that Israel and America are the bad guy. I mean, especially Israel's the bad guy. I mean, that's what it does. I mean, I think of that one guy who said the quote of, any resistance in settler capital, whatever the fuck he said, is considered bad because the only people who could use violence are the settlers. I'm sorry, I don't remember us settling Israel. We never did.
Yeah,
we never did. The Brits did for sure. We never did.
America did support Israel much.
We supported
more.
them. Oh yeah, we supported them.
But once again, for a significant portion of time, or actually all of the Islamic religion has always been against the idea of America, the fundamental ideas of America. We already pointed that out with everybody needs to be Islam, according to Osama bin Laden, which is fundamentally against the idea of America. So they've always been against America. I want to get to so again, I'm going to post the link. Hopefully YouTube doesn't, so you can read through all of this if you'd like to. But understand that it is propaganda. It is bad. And we're going to read the end of it because this is probably the most important point to discuss when it comes to my generation supporting this letter. My generation of young Americans as well supporting this letter. So the end of it. The Islamic nation that was able to dismiss and destroy the previous evil empires like yourself, the nation that rejects your attacks, wishes to remove your evils, and is prepared to fight you. You are well aware that the Islamic nation from the very core of its soul despises your haughtiness and ignorance. If the Americans refuse to listen to our advice and goodness, guidance and righteousness that we call to them, then be aware that you will lose this crusade Bush began. Just like the other previous crusades in which you were humiliated by the hands of the Mujahideen, fleeing to your home in great silence and disgrace. If the Americans do not respond, then their fate will be that of the Soviets who fled from Afghanistan to deal with their military defeat, political breakup, ideological downfall, and economic bankruptcy. This is our message to the Americans as an answer to theirs. Do they now know why we fight them and over which form of ignorance? By the permission of Allah, we shall be victorious. Question mark. I don't know if that's a typo with the question mark. Maybe it's not. What do you make of that, Josh?
I mean, it's a historical. I mean, it is. I don't know
Is it historically accurate? I genuinely don't know.
I don't believe so. No, I mean, look. I mean, he was saying it's the Soviet. Well, I think right here where he goes, are you going to be like the Soviets who fled to go fix their country? Yeah, you know why they had to go flee? Because they fixed their country? Because we kicked their ass. Because we were outspending them in every single aspect. They could not keep fighting. Because Osama, we funded you to fight them. We backed you to fight the Soviets. You wouldn't have won without us. And so he's suddenly turning on us, and he's trying to say, well, we beat them. No, you didn't. You did not. You did not beat them. We beat them through you. You were a pawn for us. That's just how it was. And so it's not accurate at all. I mean, it's blatantly inaccurate. But he's trying to make a threat. He's trying to make a point. He's trying to play the tough guy. I mean, he's trying to play the tough guy, yet he never showed his face in public and hid for 15 years until we had to, break into his house at midnight and shoot him. I mean, that's really what it came down. Yeah, that's what it came down to.
Allegedly.
No, I'm going to say it happened because it did, but I digress. Yeah, I mean, that's what happened. He hid until we had to go find him. He played the greatest game of hide and seek and lost. I mean, talk about being all tough guy. Show your face.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I think to wrap this up, again, this is not a video. I wanted everybody to see at least the main points. You want to know why? It's because when I say that sectors of the left and the woke hate America, and not just they hate the Donald Trump or they hate Republicans or they hate conservatives. No, they hate the entire idea of America. They hate the fact that you can say what you want. They hate the fact that you can live relatively freely under our entitled documents. They hate everything that America stands for. And anyone who is coming out and saying that they support Hamas, in some cases support Palestine, or that they support this letter to America and that it changed their lives, those are people that hate America. And I hate to say this because I don't like fueling further division, but I'm not the one fueling it. I'm telling you the truth when I say that they hate you too. Josh, thoughts?
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think every single one of these people who say that they support this letter and that they are in full support of Hamas, okay, get on a plane. I'll pay for your ticket. Get on a plane, fly over there, see how long you last. Because I guarantee you're not going to make it very long. Again, half the people who are sitting there supporting this letter would be killed by him. And not just shot. No, they're going to throw you off buildings. They're going to stone you to death. They're going to burn you alive. You wouldn't make it.
And this is why and the other thing too is this is not a video praising Israel and saying that Israel is a saint. I have talked previously about how there are things that Israel has done that I don't necessarily condone.
Right.
I don't necessarily support a significant level of if any financial aid going to Israel. I think we have more than enough problems we have to solve here at home. But we should, by all means, protect ourselves from anybody who is in support of this letter, its messaging, or anybody else who supports this kind of messaging, because it is inherently, definitively anti-American. So this is about exposing people to the fact that there are plenty of people out there that hate you. And as I've talked many a time before, the woke mind virus has infiltrated itself into America through means of diluted and disgusting interpretations perpetuated by our social media.
Yeah.
So, do I think everybody should read it? Yes. Josh, thoughts?
I agree. Like I said, I think everyone should read it. I think it's good to try to understand their side. I shouldn't say understand, but to hear their perspective, even if it's abhorrent, and it is abhorrent. His perspective is abhorrent and evil and disgusting. But he put this letter out there for the world to see it and reject it.
Absolutely. But understand why we reject it.
Right.
I mean, like, that's the thing. I think, so let's talk about what we can do. I want to be hopeful by the end of this because you're an educator.
Yeah.
And so my belief is that the reason why we have people that are coming out in support of this 21 years after it was written is because in those last 21 years, the teaching of the importance and grace of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence has been more than degraded by people that, again, I understand the idea of critique and being critical in education. But there are people out there that instead of being reasonably critical and saying, hey, what could be wrong in our founding documents, they instead say that our founding documents are wrong to young minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we need to have is, instead of saying that America is an inherently racist nation, instead of saying that free speech includes hate speech and that's wrong, instead of saying all these problems that America has, we return to the education that I had. And I'm sure the education that you preach, Josh, in that America is by no means a perfect nation, but we are the best thing that there is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think those are some of those exact words I've used. I said, listen, we're not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say we're perfect, because we're not. I mean, we can all sit here and probably list 20 problems that we have, but we're the best one. We're the best one out there. And everywhere else, there's something worse. We are the best one we got.
Yep.
And so let's try to preserve that.
So if you want to reject the America hating, the anti-Semitism, the anti-whiteness, the just overall hatred of the level of freedom that we have in America, then remind people that our education system needs to be heavily reformed, because that's where I think it all stems from. That's why I brought Josh on today. That's where I think it stems from, is our education system.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think the farther and farther away too that these kids get away from 9/11, now that it truly is a historic event to all of them, the farther and farther the more nuance they're going to try to add, the more grace they're going to give to these evil people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, everybody, again, let me know your thoughts in the comments about this. It's not a video I wanted to make. It's one that I felt was necessary. Josh, thank you so much for joining me today for this.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
And everybody, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, all that stuff. But in all seriousness, while I say it after pretty much every video recently, I truly mean God bless you and God bless America.